What's up, guys? Joey here at schoolofmotion.com. Thanks for watching this video. Today we are going to do a tutorial about probably the most important feature in After Effects, and I think one of the most overlooked ones, and that is the curves editor. And I'm also gonna give you guys an introduction to the whole concept of animation curves. Now, if you have done an animation program, like a traditional animation, study or something like that, then this may not be new information to you. But I'm sure a lot of you out there are like me and did not get into this field through a traditional animation route. And so I had to learn this and get comfortable with it. And as soon as I did, all of my work became 100 times better, because if you don't understand animation curves and how the curve editor works, all your animations are going to feel the same and they can feel stiff and boring, and we don't want that. So I'm going to show you guys how to create this animation, which I will show you now. Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about how I got that feel of that animation. If you notice, it was very cartoony and there was like a lot of really delayed bounces, and there was like the timing of it was not your typical default After Effects keyframe feel. So let's hop into After Effects and I'm going to teach you guys about animation curves. Alright, here we are in After Effects. So first thing I want to do is explain a little bit about the way After Effects uses curves, and it's a little different than some other programs like Cinema 4D and Nuke and Maya. So what I'm going to do is just create I'll just create a new shape. All right, we'll just make a little rectangle here, a little square. All right. So if I put a position keyframe on here, Option P, and I go forward 1 second, and I move it over here. All right, let me set my comp. All right, so let's preview this. All right, so it moves from point A to point B. Very boring. Doesn't feel that good. Feels kind of stiff. So the first trick that everybody learns is to use one of the animation helper kind of presets that come with After Effects. And so if you select both of these, go up to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, you've got Easy Ease In, Out, and Easy Ease. And the one most people use is Easy Ease. All right, and now your keyframes look a little different. And when we preview this, you'll see that it feels better, right? The box sort of slowly starts moving, and then it picks up speed, and then it slowly decelerates at the end of the move. And this is the way things move in the real world, and this is why when you see animation, you want it to feel similar to this, because it just feels more natural to you, because that's what you're used to seeing. Animation is all about tricking you into thinking things are moving that are not actually moving, and it helps the illusion if you make things move the way they do in real life. And once you sort of get the hang of that, then you can start breaking the rules and doing really cool things. So for now, we have Easy Ease keyframes. Now, what is actually happening? How is After Effects deciding how fast and how slow and when to speed up the square, and basically how is it setting the timing of this? So the way to understand this is to use this button here, which they're calling the graph editor, and it looks like something out of your algebra homework, and maybe that's why people are not really using it a lot, or not as much as they should, because it's just a little silly. I mean, look at these cute icons, and then you have this one, and it's just really boring. So what I'm going to do is click this, and you'll see now we have this graph, and now if I click on position, it will show me what my position keyframes are doing. All right, I'm going to show you guys a really handy little button. It's this one down here, Fit All Graphs to View. If you click that, it will scale your view to just fit the graph you're looking at. It's very helpful. So right now, you see this green line down here is totally flat. That is the X position. sorry, the Y position, okay? And if I float my mouse over it, it'll tell you position Y. And that's flat because this cube, this square, is not moving up and down at all. It's only moving left to right. So this curve here, this is the X position. And if you try to visualize this as we're moving left to right through time, and at the same time this curve is going, from low to high, and that low to high motion is the same as moving left to right. When you increase the X value, you're moving something to the right. So that's why it's going up. And you can see now that it's got a curve to it. And the way that you need to think about this, and it will take a little while, but you'll start to see it. The steepness of this curve tells you how fast something's going. So if this curve is flat, like it is at the beginning and the end, that means it's moving slowly. And if it's totally flat, it's not moving at all. So it's actually starting from a standstill, and then it's slowly picking up speed, and in the middle here is where it's the fastest, and you can see that's where that curve is the steepest, okay? So this is what's telling After Effects, start slow, right about here it picks up speed, and it stays fast till about here, and then it slows down again. Now you can change that, and that's the beauty. You can make it do things differently. Now the problem is, by default, After Effects puts X, Y, and if you're in 3D mode, it puts a Z value all inside of one keyframe. And what this means is, if I select this, I can't actually manipulate this curve at all, because this keyframe actually has two values inside. And I'm going to show you guys how to fix that. But in the meantime, I also want to show you the other graph editor that's inside of After Effects. And this is the sort of legacy one, the old one that was in older versions of After Effects. And they still include it just in case you want to use it. And I'm going to show you how it works. It's a lot less intuitive. If you come down and click this little button next to the eyeball and say Edit Speed Graph, now you have a totally different looking graph, okay? This graph is telling you, and it's kind of hard to explain even, but it's basically telling you how fast that layer is moving, all right? And so the steepness has nothing to do with how fast it's going. The actual value, at this point is how fast it's going. So it's starting at 0, and it's picking up speed, and then it's hitting its maximum speed here, and then it's slowing back down again. So you actually can edit these curves. If you select a keyframe, you get these little handles and you can pull them, right? And that's changing the shape of the curve. And just to show you what that does, if I pull this to the right, okay, what's happening is it's increasing that speed at a slower rate, right? And if I pull this one, now it's decelerating at a slower rate. So when I play this, you can see what it's doing. It really takes a while to pick up speed, and then when it does, it shoots over really quickly, okay? So this is kind of the shortcut. If this is the animation you want, you can use the speed graph and do it. Most of the time, I try not to use it because this doesn't tell me a lot. This is like hard to look at, and I don't like it. It offends me, and so I usually use the value graph. This makes a lot more sense. Now you can see visually, we're going slow, 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 boom, really fast right there, and then we slow down again. All right, so let me undo all of this. So the way to use the value graph to change the speed of things is to right-click or control-click on your keyframe for position or for the property. And you'll see this option here, separate dimensions. So we'll click that, and now we have X position and Y position separated out. So the Y position we can actually turn off because this is not moving on Y at all. And X position now, we have a curve, and it messed up our easy ease, but that's okay because we're gonna change this curve. So now, because the X position is on its own curve, we can change this. All right. So the way animation curves work, I explained that the steepness is how fast it's going. So if I pull this handle down like this, and if you hold Shift, it will sort of lock it to you know, to straight out. If I go like this, what I'm doing is I'm telling After Effects, we're going to go really slow. We're going to accelerate very slowly, okay? And if I pull this up like this, it's the opposite. It's saying immediately start moving quickly and then slow down. All right, and you can bend this curve as well, so you can get completely different animations. So what's happening if I do a curve like this, okay? Sort of an inverted curve. So this is telling it move very fast right off the bat and then slow way down. And if you see, you know, imagine here's your starting point, here's your ending point. Imagine cutting that in half, okay? The first half of the animation, or sorry, the second half of the animation, almost nothing happens, right? If you imagine a line here. From here to here, it's almost flat. From here to here, there's a lot going on. Really, most of the movement is happening in the first, probably third of the animation. So let's preview that. All right, and you can see it just pops out and then slows way down, which can be kind of cool. You know, if we, if this cube, or sorry, I keep calling it a cube, but it's not a cube. If this square started off screen, and we may need to stretch that keyframe out a little bit now. By the way I just did that very handy key hotkey is just the plus and minus key on that top number row, the top sort of row of your keyboard. Minus zooms out, plus zooms in. Just a nice way to do it. So if you have something like that, you know, you're trying to introduce some object into your screen, this is maybe a cool way to do it. You can really fire that thing in there quickly and get a fun little kind of effect like that. And you can really, really crank this too if you want to, you know, so that it's almost all the way there, like instantly, like pew, just like that. All right, so now what's a different type of curve? Well, if we do sort of your typical S curve like this, but we're really pulling these handles out very far. So what's happening is it slowly comes in and then flings itself over and kind of decelerates. All right. And then you could also have, you know, the opposite of the first curve where it slowly picks up speed and then it just stops very quickly. Okay. And I don't know, maybe you want that. Maybe it's some sort of jerky kind of experimental thing you're doing and that's what you want. But the key is you'll start to just intuitively know how to shape these things once you do this a few times. And I know if you've never seen this before, this may look funky to you, but I promise you, if you start getting into this graph editor and just think of it as an animation curve editor, don't call it the graph editor. But it you know, you'll start to just intuitively know where to pull these things, and you'll get a sense of, you know, having a little bit more control over your animation. You know, now it's kind of really slowly picking up speed. It gets quickly here, and then it decelerates, but much, much shorter, you know, over a much shorter time than the beginning. All right, so you have a lot of control that way. So now I'm going to show you guys the other great thing about the animation curves. So in the example video that I made for this, I just wanted to make something really simple to show you guys. And one of the basic things that you would learn in an animation program is how to make a bouncing animation, because that's sort of a good example of something that really requires you know, using some of the principles of animation to make it look right. And requires using the animation curves to get it to feel like a real bounce. So the way that I started this was I just, you know, basically said, okay, well, this box is going to land here and it's going to drop from off screen. Okay, so how many frames should it take to get from here to here? Well, I don't really know. I had to kind of experiment and play around till it felt right. But let's just try this. Let's try 20 frames. All right, that might be too much. So I'm going to put a position keyframe here. And you can see I've already separated out the dimensions on the position. So I have my X and Y separate, and I'm going to turn X off because I'm not using that right now. All right, so I have the Y position. I'm going to add another keyframe at the beginning. Okay, so now it's off screen. All right, and if we play that, that's way too slow. That's not what we want at all, right? Of course. Now, think about what happens when something falls. It's accelerating all the way down to the ground. You know, things get faster and faster and faster until they hit something, and then the direction reverses, and now they're going up in the air. All right, and so you got to kind of think about how things actually work in real life sometimes. I'm going to go into the animation curve editor for this. All right, and you can see right now it's linear, which is not what we want. What I want is I want it to start slow and get faster. So I'm actually sort of drawing the curve I want with my mouse. I don't know if that helps you guys. I'm going to select both keyframes. And these little icons over here, these are actually shortcuts to make easy ease, ease in, and ease out keyframes. So I'm just going to hit easy ease, and it'll give me this nice S curve. So this first keyframe, this is actually pretty close to what I want, but I want it to, I want this to feel a little bit cartoony. So I'm going to pull this out a little bit further. Now, this is not going to ease into the ground. It's not like there's a parachute on this little orange square. It's going to hit the ground and just come to a dead stop, basically. All right, and that's what happens when things hit the ground. So if we preview this really quickly, okay, you can see it doesn't quite feel natural yet. It feels a little slow, maybe. So I'm gonna click and just drag this over, and I'm gonna have this not accelerate so slowly. I'm just gonna kind of mess with this curve a little bit. All right, and it's trial and error. I'm not a super advanced animator by any stretch, but usually I can play around with it until it starts to feel good. All right, so that's starting to feel pretty good. It kind of lingers and then falls. Okay, it's almost like it fell off a table that's just off screen. All right, so what happens next? Now it's going to bounce up somewhere. And a good rule of thumb if you're doing something like this is just make it bounce up half the height it fell from. All right, and then next time it bounces, half that height, and then it'll sort of decay. And you can also do that with your keyframes. So we're at frame 17. That's how long it took to fall. So let's just, for easy math, let's say 16 frames. So how many frames should it go up? Well, half of 16 would be 8 frames. So why don't we do 8 frames? So from 17, that would be, let's see, because we're in 24, so that'd actually be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. And I'm going to add a couple of extra frames because I do want it to kind of have a little bit of that cartoony feel to it, almost like it sticks to the floor and then flings itself back up and hangs a little bit longer than it should. So I want this cube to now come up here, maybe about to there. And you can see that as I did that, it actually added a point on my curve. All right. Now, it starts here, it falls and hits. When it hits, it's not going to bounce immediately back up like that, okay? But it's also not going to slowly accelerate like this. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, right? Because, and this also depends if you're trying to make the ball feel like a rubber ball or like a pool ball, like a billiards ball. The material it's made of is going to affect that too. So we're pretending this is some really flexible, bouncy material. So I do want it to accelerate up, and then when it gets to the top, it's going to decelerate and hang there for a second, all right? So what I did was I basically made an S-curve, but then I'm going to bend this down just a little bit, okay? So that when it hits, it bounces up right away, but slower, So let's preview that real quick. Okay? Now that feels way too slow how it comes out of that, okay? So I am actually going to just shorten that like this and lengthen that. Okay? It's getting better. And the whole thing feels a little slow, so I'm actually just going to compress this a little bit. And you can see, you're probably starting to see the benefit of animating this way. This actually, in a visual way, represents what this square is doing. I almost called it a cube again. All right, so now it's going to fall down, and when it's falling, it's probably going to take the same amount of frames as when it went up, okay? So this was from frame 14 to 22, that's 8 frames. So we'll go another 8 frames, and it's going to come back to here. And all I did was select this and hit copy paste. All right, and the motion, it's basically going to mirror what's happening here, except it will not ease into the ground, right? It's just going to slam into it. So if we play this, right, it's starting to feel like a bounce. All right, and this curve is telling you what's happening. Slams into the ground, eases out, stops, eases down, and then slams into the ground again. All right, so now we're going to go 4 frames. All right, and you can see where this keyframe was that we just had the square at, and I'm going to go halfway to that keyframe. Okay, and basically all we have to do now is make the next curve look just like this one, just smaller. All right, so if I look at the angle of that, I can just sort of mimic that. Pull this out, go forward 4 frames, copy and paste this, and actually maybe I'll copy and paste, no, I will copy. I'll copy and paste this one. And you can see it actually, it sort of maintained the angle of this little handle. So it's sort of, once you set a curve here, you know, you set your Bezier handles for what the curve is going to do on the incoming and the outgoing side. You can copy and paste those and it'll maintain that for you. All right, so let's see how our bounce is doing. All right, it's feeling pretty good so far. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have it bounce a couple more times, and then we're going to tweak the curve overall. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. All right, so that was 4 frames. So now why don't we do 3 frames? Just because, so it's going to come up about halfway. All right, and then we'll copy this. And I'm just trying to make each curve a little miniature version of the preceding curve, you know, and you can kind of see the shape of it. All right, one more bounce, 2 frames. Just go halfway. All right, and this last bounce, I mean, it's so quick that I don't need to mess with the curves too much. Okay, so now we've got a decent, it's not amazing, but it's a decent bounce animation, right? And the speed of it feels appropriate. You know, and you could sit here and tweak this for another 10 minutes and probably get it better. But the next thing I want to show you is, you know, how do we make it even more exaggerated, even more cartoony? All right, so we've got this nice curve here, and what we can basically do is just, you know, we can scale our keyframes so we can make this take a little longer, but then actually, you know, compress the curves so that there's more action sort of in between the acceleration and the deceleration. So if you guys don't know, the way to scale keyframes in After Effects, you have to select all the keyframes you want to scale, and you hold Option. And on a PC, I'm assuming Option is Alt maybe, or Control. So if you click either the first or last keyframe, you can't select any of the ones in the middle, it won't work. So if I hold Option and click and drag, you see how it scales them all? All right, so I'm going to scale them just a little bit longer. Okay, just a few frames. Go back into my curves. Now what I want to happen is let's just play this really quickly. Okay, I want the square to hang a little bit longer at the top of each bounce and at the top at the beginning. Okay, almost like a cartoon, like when, you know, Wile E. Coyote hangs in midair for a little bit longer than he should. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the keyframes which represent the top of the bounce. And then at the same time, I can just pull all of their handles. So I can stretch those out, and I can stretch them out on both sides. And you can see that when they're all selected, they all respond the same way. All right, so now let's play that. Cool. So now it's a lot more cartoony, and you know, there's a lot more going on. Now, you're probably noticing this doesn't feel exactly right, and that's also because when you're doing something like this, generally it's good to use what's called squash and stretch. If you've never heard of that, you can Google it and it will be explained to you. There's a million websites that will explain what that is. And in After Effects, the way that you would do that is you would just animate the scale of this square. I don't want to spend too much time on this tutorial, so I'm not going to do that. Maybe that's one for another day. But I want to show you how you can, you can add to this a little bit by creating those little waves that were in the video, sort of those impact waves that came out. Because using animation curves, it's not just for position. You can use them for anything. So the way that I made, and actually let me pull this up and show you guys the way I made these little radiating lines that came out. So the way I did that was I made a new comp. I called it wave, and I added a shape layer, and I wanted a square so that it would match the shape of the square that's bouncing. So let's just name this wave 01. All right, and so right now I need to dive into the contents of this shape layer, go into the rectangle path, and I want to make this path match the size of my square. All right. And then I want to delete the fill, so I only have a stroke. And let's just change that stroke to 2 pixels, and let's make it black so we can see it a little better. All right, so this is what I had, and what I wanted was as soon as that square hits, I want sort of a radiating square to pop out of it like an impact wave, but I also wanted it to kind of draw and do some cool stuff. So the first thing I wanted was the size to get bigger. So what I did was I put a keyframe here, and I went forward 1 second, and I made it grow pretty big. All right, and if we RAM preview that, that's really boring, of course, right? So now we know how to make it feel better. We can add, and by the way, the hotkey to add easy ease is F9. Just memorize that. It's just a good place to start before you go into the curve editor, so I always make my keyframes easy ease, then I go into the curve editor, and I'm going to click this button. All right, so now I have this nice S curve. Now, when that square hits the ground, I want those things to shoot out and then slow down. All right, so right now you can see it's slowly accelerating. That's not what we want. We want it to shoot out. So I'm going to invert this curve like this, okay? And then I want it to really slow down at the end. So now let's play that, okay? Now it feels a little bit more like a pop, like a explosion or something. All right, so that's a good start. So then the next thing I wanted to do was have I didn't want the entire square drawn on. I just wanted a piece of it, and I kind of wanted it animating a little bit. So I'm going to show you guys a trick that I like to do, and I've done this in a lot of projects, and you can get some cool effects with it. What you do is you add a trim paths effector. I'm not sure what these are called, but you add a trim paths to this, and then you open it up, and what trim paths does is it lets you determine the start and end of the path that's actually going to be drawn. So instead of drawing this entire square, I can set this to, I don't know, let's say 30, and it only draws a little piece of it. All right, and I kind of want more than that, so let's set it to 50. All right, so it draws 50% of the square, and then you can use this offset. And I know it's a little tricky to see with the handles on here, but now you can see that I can basically make the snake game that used to show up on your Nokia phone. So I'm going to what I'm going to do is keyframe that, and I basically want it to rotate as the square is growing. So I'm going to have it rotate, let's say 90 degrees. Cool. Okay. So now if I play this, you know, the scale feels good, but that move doesn't feel good. I want that move to feel the same as the scale. So I'm gonna select keyframes. I'm gonna hit F9. I'm gonna go in a graph editor, and I'm going to make this curve look exactly the same as the other one. And if it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but if you wanted it to be exactly the same, you can actually select multiple properties and see their curves together. So I can kind of visually check and make sure that my curves are actually looking the same. All right, so now you get this kind of interesting effect. And maybe as a little bonus, I'm actually gonna make this animate a little differently than the one I showed you guys at the beginning of the video. As it offsets, I'm gonna have it actually draw off too. So I'm gonna, by the way, another hotkey. If you hit U, you may know it brings up the properties on that layer that have keyframes. If you hit U twice, it brings up anything that has been changed, which is great when you're working with shape layers, because if you've added things or if you've tweaked anything, it'll just show you that. So I want another option in trim paths, which is the start. All right, so you can see I can animate the start, and if I animate it to match the end, then the shape goes away. So let's put a keyframe at the beginning. Go forward 1 second. Set the start to 50 so it matches the ending. All right, hit F9. Go to the graph editor. Pull this up. This is like old hat to you guys by now. All right, so now you get this interesting animation, right? This kind of funky looking thing. And by itself, it's not much. It definitely doesn't look like an impact wave or something. But if let me scale this layer up a little bit. All right, I'm gonna scale it up to 200%. That's too big. Maybe 150. All right, if I duplicate this and I scale its copy down 10% less, and then I'm going to offset it a couple of frames. So I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to hit Page Down twice, and it's going to slide that two frames. And then I'm also going to rotate it 90 degrees. All right, so now I get this cool kind of cascading thing. And I'm going to do that a few more times. So scale this to 130. Rotate this 180 degrees. All right, and what do we have now? Now we have something kind of interesting. I actually like this a lot better than the one that was on the clip I showed you guys. So yeah, so you get this kind of interesting impact wave thing, and then I just brought that in, and I just lined it up. Let me scale this down a little bit. Yeah, and that's basically it. And then I colorized it. You know, I used a fill effect to colorize it, and I had I had the square change color every time it landed and some other things. But basically, that's all I did. So I'm going to duplicate the wave, and every time it lands, I'm going to add another one. And here's another keyframe for you guys. So I'm hitting Command D to duplicate the layer, and then I'm hitting the left bracket. And what that does is it brings whatever layer is selected, it brings the head of it to wherever your playhead is, this red line. Right? And then at the end, there's one more. All right, so now you can see that, it starts to get a little crazy at the end. So what I did was actually take each wave, the whole pre-comp of that wave, and rotate it 90 degrees. 180, 270, and then I'll rotate this first one -90. So now you actually get kind of slightly different waves each time. So when you have multiple ones playing, they don't overlap as much. And now I'm starting to critique this, and I'm thinking that maybe 2 frames apart isn't enough. Maybe you need like 3 or 4 frames, and maybe they should be a little random. Now let's play that. Yeah, it needs a little work. What are you going to do? Anyway, so I hope that now you guys understand the animation curve editor a little bit better in After Effects. And I really, really want you guys to get in there and use that thing, because, I've seen a lot of people do things like this, which makes me crazy, where they're animating something and they say, okay, I want this cube to be here in a second, but I want it to be almost all the way there by 12 frames. So they go to frame 12 and they just do this, and now they have 3 keyframes. And why? You don't need 3 keyframes. All you need is 2. You want to have the least amount of keyframes humanly possible when you're doing motion graphics. That is a good rule, because inevitably when you're doing stuff professionally, it's all going to change. And if you have 2 keyframes versus 4 keyframes, it will take you half the time. So get in there, use the animation curve editor, make your animations feel good, and just remember that when you animate this way, you can actually see your animation. If you're doing a bounce, you can actually see the bounce, and after a while, you'll in a year, if you guys do this, you could look at this and tell me what's happening without actually seeing the animation. And you'll have a common language when you're talking to other animators, and when you're, if you ever get to a position where you're supervising somebody and you see that their animation doesn't feel right, you can tell them, go into that curve editor and, pull those handles out and make that deceleration a lot longer, and maybe they won't know what you're talking about, but you can show them and impress your friends. So I hope this was helpful, and I have some more exciting stuff coming up this week. We are releasing scenery this week, and if you aren't familiar with that, if you see some of my other tutorials, you'll see little demos of it here and there. And I look forward to all your comments and emails. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. SchoolofMotion.com. I will see you guys later.